This is Reading Adam here, back at you with another book. It is, can the camera see this well? It's Imperium by, and I'm going to butcher this, by unpronounceable. So, Ryszard Kapuscinski, I believe. Again, you can see that name for yourself, and now I can't pronounce names like that. So, this book has, well, a few quick points. I'm coming back at you again, and I don't usually, my videos are far and few between, even though I'm reading tons of books, just because I don't like to record when my family is here. When my family is here, then my daughter would just interrupt me constantly, and my wife would probably be in the way and laughing at me, and so forth and so on. So I prefer to do this in secret, in silence, and without any mind to anybody possibly being there. Shout out to these bookmark things I have here. It's a Grumpy Cat bookmark thing, and it's from Page Clips. Was that Antioch, or Trends International, trendsinternational.com, Antioch by Trends. Shout out to them for the Grumpy Cat bookmarks that I got from my mother-in-law for Christmas. So, a few things. This is a book that is absolutely incredible, and if you've already stopped the video, hopefully you haven't stopped it yet, but if you don't listen to me talk the whole time, please pick this book up. Please read it. It's absolutely amazing. It's nonfiction, but it's written like literature. It's unbelievable. So, now if you're still listening, which hopefully you are, then there's a few things that I wanted to discuss about this book, but I'm going to open with something I don't normally do, which is I'm going to read a couple pages here, just a couple pages, just to kind of give you an idea of the amazingness of the book. So let me just drink a little bit of water here, and I will begin. My class had dwindled by a half. Okay, let me give you some quick context. This is the author in Poland. This is after World War II. The Soviets are in control of Poland. So this is just the very opening. There's lots of stuff like this in here. But this kind of stood out to me. I had related this story to my wife. I told my wife, you have to read this. And I'll get into why after I read this little bit. But let me go ahead with this now. Again, my class had dwindled by a half. Our teacher sat me on a bench with a boy whose name was Orion. We liked each other at once and began walking home together. One day Orion told me that on Zawalna Street they were supposed to be selling candy, and that if I wanted to, we could go stand in line together. It was a beautiful gesture, his telling me about this candy, for we had stopped even dreaming of sweets long ago. Mother gave me permission, and we went to Zawalna Street. It was dark, and snow was falling. In front of the shop there was already a long line of children, stretching the length of several houses. The shop was closed with wooden shutters. The children standing at the head of the line said that it wouldn't open until tomorrow, and that one had to stand here all night. Distressed, we returned to our place at the end of the queue. But new children were arriving continually. The line grew into infinity. It became even colder than it had been during the day. The frost sharp, piercing, biting. As the minutes passed, then the hours, it was increasingly difficult to stand. I had had for some time very painful, and I'm going to probably mispronounce this, abscesses on my legs and hands, burning, swollen with pus. Now the icy cold made the pain unbearable. I moaned with every movement. Meantime, one fragment of the line after another would break away and scatter over the snowy, frozen street. To warm themselves, the children played tag. They tussled, wrestled, rolled in the white powder. Then they returned to the line, and the next group would sally forth yelling. In the middle of the night, someone lit a fire. A delicious, luxuriant flame burst out. One by one, we took turns beside it so as to warm our hands, if only for a moment. The faces of the children who managed to push their way to the fire reflected a golden glow. In this glow, their faces thawed, flushed with warmth. Thus warmed, they returned to their places and passed on to us, still standing in line, the rays of their heat. Toward morning, sleep overcame the line. Warnings about how one shouldn't sleep in freezing temperatures, for that means death, were of no use. No one had the strength anymore to look for firewood or play our game, the square circle. The cold pierced through to the bone, cruel, crackling. Hands and feet went numb. To save ourselves, to last the night, we stood in line huddled tightly together, one close upon the other. Despite the chain in which we locked fiercely and desperately together, all remaining warmth was escaping. The snow was burying us more and more, blanketing us with a white, soft sheepskin. In the morning darkness, 2 women wrapped in thick scarves arrived and started to open the shop. The line sprang to life. We dreamed mountains of candies, magnificent chocolate palaces. We dreamed marzipan princesses and gingerbread pages. Our imagination was afire. Everything in it sparkled, radiated. Finally, the doors of the shop opened and the line moved. Everyone was pushing so as to warm himself and get to the front. But in the shop there was neither candy nor chocolate palaces. The women were selling empty fruit candy tins, one for each. They were round, large cans, their sides painted with colorful cocky roosters and an inscription in Polish, I Wedel. At first we were extremely disappointed and depressed. Orion was crying, but when we began to inspect our loot more closely, we slowly cheered up. On the inside walls of these cans, there remained after the candy a sweet deposit, fine multicolored chips, a thick residue smelling of fruit. Why, our mothers could boil some water in these cans and offer us a sweet aromatic drink. Already appeased, contented even, instead of going straight home, we turned into the park, at the place where the circus stood during the summer. The circus had departed long ago, but it had gone in a hurry and left behind the carousel. The motor from the carousel had been stolen, as had almost all the seats, but one seat remained, and if one gathered together several boys, they could get the carousel moving with a rod in such a way that it spun like mad. It is empty and silent in the park, so we run to the carousel and start turning it. It is already stirring, creaking. I jump into the seat and buckle myself with the chain. Orion gives the orders, shouts, fires up the boys, urges them on, and they, like galley slaves, push on the rod with all their might, faster and faster and faster. Orion, all in a fever, shouts at the top of his lungs. A madness has already seized the other boys too. The carousel rushes round. I feel a stinging, frosty wind which lashes my face, a gusting and increasingly stronger wind on whose wings I rise like a pilot, like a bird, like a cloud. End chapter. Nothing more about his childhood after that. That's his childhood. That's a Polish kid who survived World War II, just dealing with the regular days of survival. My daughter has known the sweet nectar taste of candy for a couple years now. And I've never seen her happier than if you tell her that you're going to give her a piece of candy. That's when her face lights up. It transforms. transfigures with pure, beaming, radiating happiness at the thought of sugar. And we're all kind of that way. We're all addicted to sugar. Very few of us have overcome that. That's currently my big struggle, is mitigating sugar, so I don't consume too much. I know that one day when I die, it'll probably be because of sugar. But these kids, that was profound to me, because I can't imagine the fact that, I can't imagine just staying. I don't think I've stayed outside all night without anything but basically the clothes on my back to keep me alive. I don't think I've ever stayed out all night in the winter. And I can't imagine how cold that must have been. The kids were trying to survive through the night. For what? For what? For empty tin cans? Like, have you ever opened like a little plastic bag of gummies, and then after you've eaten them, you smell the bag and it has that strong smell of the gummies? Like that must have been what the smell kind of was for that. That's what I imagined it to be with the tin fruit cans. And the fact that it wasn't even that there was anything in there. It was just they were empty, but because of the strong smell. Like, that was their candy. Like, they had access to nothing. And this is what this book kind of was a wake-up call for. That people back then, and up until basically the fall of the Soviet Union, because there's a lot of information here about just how god-awful it was, and how little people had, and how desperate they were for survival. I was constantly amazed that people could survive in the conditions that are described for the poor, wretched souls who went to Siberia. There's a lot of discussion about some of the countries, some of the Stan nations that we never hear anything about, such as Kazakhstan, and oh man, what are some of the others? I know Azerbaijan is in there, Armenia is in there. So some of those nations are discussed in here. Turkestan, is that even a nation? Oh boy, I'm embarrassing myself right now. But he talks about a lot of the parts of the Soviet Union that are not. You never hear anything about in school. So Georgia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan. That's the one I was thinking of. And there's Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan. I'm looking at a map now. All right. So these are all above. So Azerbaijan and Armenia are both to the east of Turkey, and Georgia is just above Armenia. So he kind of discusses their history. There's a little bit of history in that as well. He kind of discusses their history, and Kazakhstan as well. He goes into a little bit about Ukraine. But these are peoples that we don't learn a lot about. But these are peoples that have suffered quite a bit, and they suffered even more. They were always kind of poor, but they suffered even more at the hands of the Soviets. And it really, you learn a lot about just how awful it was. But written very well, written in the way that I just read to you. So I gotta say, one thing about this book is, now this book I've had in my personal library for a decade or more. I think when I was in college, I was just going through. I believe I picked this book up at random from some library sale or something. I just saw like a half picture of Lenin on there, and I just saw Imperium. I think I basically looked at it super quick and didn't think anything about it. I didn't know what I was picking up when I grabbed this. I had no idea. And then because this year I decided that I was going to spend the entire year reading through all of the books I already own rather than read new books or borrow books from the library, because I have 300 books to read through, and I'm about 30 or 40 books in, and going strong. But it's very cathartic. It's closure. It's closure. And I might have never read this book. If I didn't decide to do that, read all my books this year, I might have never read this book, because I would have looked at it. I mean, if you look at it, you look at the author's name, you don't recognize it. Imperium, okay, what does that even tell you? Well, the Imperium means like the whole of the Soviet area that they controlled. Um, there's that one little picture in the front. The back doesn't kind of tell you very much. There's even more picture of Lenin and probably one of the other leaders of the Soviet Union. It just doesn't tell you much. It looks like it was only, I don't, maybe I picked this up in Canada or something, because it's a nonfiction, but it's only sold in the UK. There's no US dollar or Canadian dollar, so I don't know how I got this book, but I got it, and it's absolutely incredible. It's easily one of my favorite books that, let's see, published 1993. But the copyright was 1988. That's probably when he first wrote it. So this is definitely one of my favorite books that I own now, because it's just absolutely incredible stories about the real human condition, nothing made up. Maybe, I mean, who knows how much, sometimes biography or confessions can include a little bit of stretching the truth. I have no idea with this book. I mean, why even bother, given how horrendous the lives of so many people were? Like, I can't imagine. It's incredible to me the amount of freezing temperature, starvation, dressed in rags, and beatings that people took in Siberia. Like, I can't even imagine how many people survived that for any amount of time. And then being made to work very hard in mines and terrible conditions, where if you just take a break, like, you're beaten basically to death. I can't imagine being one of those people, and that's why I said poor wretched souls who went off to Siberia. What this book told me is something that I think in the West is something we kind of lost touch with, is we live in civilization. We live in a time period where I can basically have just about anything I actually want. In fact, I have so much already that I'm trying to learn, as I am reading the books I already own. I'm trying to learn to enjoy the stuff I already have. Even if I do have lots of student loan debt, even if I have this or that going on, none of my problems amount to, like, just trying to literally survive another day. I've never experienced that, so that's part of what I'm noticing with something like this. Is in the West, it seems like a popular pastime is to bitch about life and or gossip about other people's lives, and bitch about our jobs. One thing I noticed, ever since I was a teenager, ever since I was a working individual, every job I've had, a lot of people in the job complained about the job all the time. And I found that men tend to complain less about their work than women. Women do complain. A lot of the women I've known in my jobs have complained a lot. And usually I find that the customer service I get from women is worse than the customer service I get from men. And I don't know why that is. It just seems to be something that I've observed. But in general, most people have been miserable at their jobs. Whether they're the boss, whether they're the mechanic, the salesman, the customer service rep, the secretary. I mean, I don't know. So for me, I'm a you know, I don't know if it's obvious or not, but I'm an introverted, more logically minded person. I'm not very emotional. I'm not very expressive. Like, this is about as expressive as I can get, and um, I'm not. I'm not the type to complain about something unless it's really bothering me. Because what bothers me is illogical people or emotional people. And this is something I've learned at my current job just from taking different tests and things they have you take to kind of figure out your working personality. And so illogical things don't make sense to me. They bother me. And illogical people, irrationality gets under my skin. So to me, it's like, why are these people bitching so much about their jobs, about their lives? It was starting to bring me down because I was just one of those weirdos who was like, yeah, I got a job, I'm making some money, maybe I can work hard and get ahead, or maybe I can build some character at this job. There's something I'm going to learn at this job that I'm going to take with me. There's something there. So I'm the type that tries to have a positive mindset, even in a bad circumstance, because I've learned that sometimes jobs that seem bad, um, there's still you can still enjoy the job if you just take it seriously, because you have to. I mean, you can't just quit. I mean, when you're very young and you live with your parents, you can quit, and the worst thing you're going to deal with is your parents griping and bitching to you about get another job, but you're not going to be out on the street. You're not going to be starving. You don't have a child that's going to be starving. Right now, as I am right now, if I just suddenly I don't want to work, okay, then I don't want to live in a house. Then I don't want my child to survive. Then I don't want to survive myself. So that I can't do that. It's not an option. So you have to learn how to cope. You have to learn what you want to do with your life, with your job. And the thing is, in the West, we take for granted what we have. All right, and I use the example of people complaining about their jobs because the job I'm at currently, one of the huge things that really made me like it to begin with is that they would fire you if you were miserable at your job, because the boss, the CEO, would see it as he's doing you a favor by firing you if you're miserable, if you hate your job. That makes sense. That makes sense. Like I've seen people who seem so miserable at their job. I'm like, why don't you just quit? Like, find something else. It's not worth it. Like, it sounds like you're suffering. Why this is not worth it to you? Why don't you find something else? And they never would, and I never understood that. Because when you read something like this, you find out what real human suffering is. These people, you've never been in a situation where you've contemplated killing family members because you're starving to death and they're eating some food that you could eat. Okay? You're not in that situation. You find out about people who are in that situation here. People who killed their children. All right? Can you imagine as a parent killing your child just for food? For food? But everybody is starving. There's food. You're eating grass. There's nothing. There's nothing. And you're probably going to die of starvation anyway. But there's horrible things that people have been forced to do. And we complain about the smallest things. Somebody said this to me, or I didn't get that, or I wanted more of this, or I'm too fat. I live too luxuriously, and I'm bored, and there's too much entertainment, and this show sucks, and that show sucks, and when I went to see this movie, it was a waste of my time, and all these people on Twitter annoy me, and so forth and so on. Like, ad infinitum. Like, we live completely luxuriously, even to the point where like Instagram stars, women who are already beautiful, and are young and in the flower of their youth are injecting their lips, getting fillers in and adding stuff to their buttocks, their breasts, having nose jobs, doing all this stuff when they don't need to. They're already attractive, but because of the attention and needing to stay on top, needing to push the envelope, we do completely stupid things. And we have no idea how good it is. This is why reading can be beneficial. This is better than a self-help book. Better than a self-help book because it puts things into perspective for you. First off, you're like, well, I don't want civilization to go away. I don't want life to become what these people had to go through. All in search of some political ideal that they thought would make their lives better. If they had any idea how miserable it would get, then I don't know. I mean, would they still have done it? Would they still have had the revolution? And would they have tolerated Stalin and everybody? I don't know. But it's incredible how bad it can get. I mean, right now I live like a king. And although I don't quite literally live like a king, I live better than a king. So in the past, a king, I don't have to worry about somebody coming to murder me, like a family member to murder me to become king. I don't have to worry about a rival potentially murdering me. I don't have to worry about a rival army or nation taking over mine, and I die in a violent, horrible death in battle, or I die, with a horrible death, being tortured or enslaved by the rival king, and so forth and so on. I'm not worried about dying of some random disease. Yes, I guess that still could happen, but I feel confident that at least something might possibly be some kind of treatment or something could be possible because we live in a very biologically high advanced scientific age where medical knowledge is better than it's ever been. And mostly we're just trying to prevent disease rather than trying to not catch it. And we know that if you catch disease, prayer and stuff, yeah, you can do that, but more likely than not, you're going to go to the doctor, you're going to have tests done, etc. So, we live in a weird time where we're facing challenges that are non-challenges, given perspective of human history. I mean, I live better than almost all of humanity did for the entirety of the past. I don't, a lot of people have one kid, two kids, maybe. They don't have very big families today because we're wealthier. But also, our kids don't die like they used to. I was reading a book. It was a biography of Charles Dickens. Excuse me. And in London, in Charles Dickens' age, half of all children died. It was a very, very heavily kind of polluted place. There was no sanitation. People were living among dead bodies and in horrible, wretched filth in some of the tenements and slums of London. It was horrible if you read about it. The rate of death and dying to disease, water was completely filthy. There was just refuse from there were not toilets and stuff like there are today. So where would you find that stuff? Out on the street, in the homes. Sometimes people who were very poor couldn't even afford to bury, some places where people were buried, there was just mounds of bones, mounds of bodies. They couldn't even fit them all in. And it was because the city grew so fast and they just weren't able to take it on. So half of all children died. Now, nobody really has to deal, you very rarely meet somebody today who's had to deal with the death of their children. Usually it's an extreme tragedy this day and age, but it was fairly common back then. That didn't mean it would be any easier. I mean, I can't imagine losing my child. That's my worst nightmare. So I can't imagine having 6 kids or 8 kids or 13 kids and half of them die, and then maybe your wife also dies in childbirth with one, and then you kind of suddenly have all these kids, but then you get a disease and you die, and then all your kids are orphaned. I mean, life was not easy for humanity for much of our existence. We romanticize the past in the same way we romanticize our childhoods. Like I told my wife the other day, I feel like uh, adulthood for millennials, and probably for a lot of people for the past several generations, but I feel like adulthood is constantly chasing the dollar to recreate summer vacation. I feel like we're all trying to we want enough money, we want to win the lottery, we want a super high paying job, we want a great retirement. We're just chasing the dollar, working hard, just so we can experience again summer vacation. Because if you remember, summer vacation, your parents took care of the bills, you didn't have to worry about money. They cooked all the food, you didn't have to worry about cooking, taking care of yourself. You just had to worry about what fun thing was I going to do next. And we don't have the ability to do that as adults. If you went on vacation as a child, it was amazing. I remember vacations were unbelievably joyous when I was a kid, and then I took vacation as an adult. And I was like, this is stressful. This is. I feel like I'm spending all my time planning or worrying about this or that. I should be relaxing. I couldn't relax. It's because I had to take care of everything. And I had to be the responsible one. So taking on a responsibility, that is the very adult thing to do. And I feel like if a lot of people chase money because if you have enough money, then you can have somebody else plan your vacation. You can have a personal chef, or you can just order out meals or go out to dinner all the time, and you don't have to worry about cooking. Um, you can just be entertained constantly all day long. You don't have to worry about working hard. You don't have to worry about the bills they're paid for. Who cares? You got that FU money. You can do whatever you want. You can explore whatever hobby you want. So it's a lot of our modern life is trying to recreate that glorious childhood. Now, this guy didn't have that. He had that awful childhood of, half his class had disappeared. They were worried about being deported because the Soviet Union moved a lot of populations around, and you learn about that in this book. It was one of their mechanisms of kind of control. But so he was worried about deportation. They constantly had soldiers ruining things, destroying things. At one point, soldiers just randomly pointed a cannon at the church and just blew the church apart just cause. And it was like chaos, and people had nothing, and they were hungry. And when you're hungry, like day after day, like I've been hungry here and there, and I have done like a 56-hour fast. So I know a little bit about hunger, but not the kind of hunger where you're constantly fasting because you have no choice, and you tend to be hungrier if you're not really fasting, but you go a period of time and then you eat just a little thing, then you go a long period of time without eating, and then you eat another little thing. You're even hungrier there because your body is still, it's not in that fasted state. So people are probably miserably hungry. And the fact that civilization somehow didn't utterly break down is astounding. So that must mean that the way we are, our culture around us, the way people generally accept this is how life should be, does have some power. And if you bring in a bunch of people who don't think that same way, then how can you maintain it? I mean, after reading this book, I'm like, yeah, I love civilization. I want to keep civilization here. I don't want to break this, have things broken up. I mean, if anybody is thinking about, socialism and communism are a-okay, maybe read this book. Tell me what you think. Tell me if that's a paradise, workers' paradise for you. But I just don't think we've learned our lesson yet. I don't know if humanity can learn its lesson. I try to every day. This is where that gratefulness comes from. Like, I'm grateful that I live in a heated home that is not freezing cold. It's very comfortable in here. I'm glad that I know what comfort is. I think a lot of people never really knew what true comfort was growing up in the Soviet Union, especially if you grew up in a part that wasn't even Russia proper, but was one of those surrounding countries they had control over. And so, I'm grateful that we know what comfort is. I'm grateful that I can read something like this and get the perspective that I have it pretty darn good. I live better than kings did. I don't live as good as kings did. I live better than they did. I have access to anything I want through the internet. I have access to any real food that I want. I mean, honestly, other than extremely expensive cuts of meat, I can explore any palate that I really care about. I mean, I could easily get a book on Korean barbecue or whatever and make my own, right? I could say like, oh, tonight I want to try Thai rather than go out. Let me just get a Thai cookbook and then, or look up some recipes online. I don't even have to buy a book. And then I can just go out and get the ingredients from my local supermarket. And then, if like, oh, my pants don't fit anymore, let me just go out and buy other pants for cheap. It's it's incredible what we have access to, and this is why you got to read books. So sometimes you come across a book that's just blows you away, puts things in perspective for you, and sometimes having something put in perspective for you, making you appreciate what you have, giving you the contrast so that when you remind yourself, hey, it's great that I'm not dying of a horrible disease today. Um, Read about, or it's great that, I'm looking outside and there's snow, it's cold, and I don't have to be out there barefoot in rags working in a mine, where I'm going to be beaten to death if I slow down production. And I have to do that from when the sun is up all the way till the sun is down. Like, I'm kind of lucky that that's not how my day is going to go today. So appreciate what you have. Humans have we seem to have this desire to continue the continue suffering. To no matter what our situation is, we feel like we're suffering, and you are not suffering. You are not suffering, because we've kind of forgotten what true suffering is, and I hope that stays forgotten in many ways. Like, I don't want us to suddenly go back to what the Soviet Union was. I don't want us to suddenly experience horrible, horrific suffering. That's civilization ending. That would be really bad. I mean, that was exciting as a young guy. Like, you were excited to think of society falling apart like a zombie apocalypse because suddenly you could do whatever you wanted. You could be king of the hill, whatever. That's exciting for young people. But when you get older, when you take on responsibility, when you have a family, not just yourself to protect, but your family that you feel responsible for, then those fantasies are revealed for what they are: horrible nightmares. And so this book is something that I really, really strongly encourage you to read it. And I guess I will leave it at that. I think that's about all I was going to do. I wasn't going to review too much of the actual information from the book because, like I said, a review wouldn't do it justice. It's the kind of book that you have to read. It's a quick read. It's an easy read, but it's very profound just based on the information. It's incredible. The guy kind of travels around the former USSR and stuff like that, and it's incredible the different areas and the things he went through. I mean, a lot of the good information is because this guy lived it and traveled to different areas and attempted to collect information. He was kind of like a journalist. But absolutely incredible, amazing book. You're doing yourself a disservice by ignoring it. And I will leave it at that. You have a good day. Bye now.